the injury. It's not about the injury. It's about the recovery. It's about the recovery.
Hey folks, Paul Padda here with the Paul Padda Podcast, coming to you from Red Chip Studios. Very excited to have a guest on today that is going to provide a lot of great information. You have a phenomenal background. Happy to have you, Judge Vincent Ochoa. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
And Judge Ochoa, you are a judge in Clark County District Court Family Court Division, correct?
Correct.
You're an incumbent judge. You're facing re-election, correct?
Right.
So I know about your background. I want to have a lot of my viewers get to know you a little bit more. But if folks after the show want to go and find out more about you, where on the web can they go?
JudgeVincentOchoa.com. That's my webpage. And from there, you can be connected to my Facebook page.
And when did you first become a judge?
I was elected in 2011. I've been on a bench now for, this will be my 10th year. I've been elected and re-elected.
Tell our viewers a little bit about the court over which you preside and what kind of cases end up there.
We just had a study done by a national group. They compared us to King County, New York, and in family court, because it was the same population base. Mm-hmm. They have twice as many family court judges as we have here. Wow. But we're doing a good job, they said, and we're going to increase by 6 judges next year. So that's going to help. But there's so many cases in family court, and it keeps growing. And, you know, we get done with this week's work, and then we have another week full of cases scheduled.
So what type of cases typically end up in family court? Like, what would be some of the examples?
There's the number one that everyone's familiar with is domestic, which is divorces, child custody, child support. But we also have a juvenile court there, which does anyone under 18 who is involved in what's usually a crime for an adult. We also have abuse and neglect, where we try to protect children where something severe happens and someone needs to come in there and protect them, sometimes from their own parents. So we have abuse and neglect. We also do guardianship work, adults and minor guardianships, and then we do termination of parental rights cases. A lot of our cases are not related to a marriage, because more and more people are having children but are not getting married. We also do partnership cases where people enter into a partnership instead of a regular marriage.
Now, folks who find themselves in family court coming before a judge like yourself, a lot of litigants, do you find that many of them have attorneys, or they are self-represented?
67% are without attorneys in domestic cases. So less than 40% come with an attorney. So it's difficult because, number one, they're nervous because they're facing court, which a lot of them have not been in court. Second, they don't know very little about how to represent themselves, and even less about family law. Yeah.
And that's really unusual, right? Because in the criminal system, most folks either have a private lawyer or they get a court-appointed attorney. On the civil side, certainly a lot of personal injury cases, business disputes, you'll find the litigants have attorneys. But yet, I guess in family court, the norm is actually that folks are self-represented, which is, it just strikes me as seeming a little unusual.
Well, things are changing. For example, in guardianship, we now appoint an attorney for every person facing a guardianship. In the adult system, as far as domestic cases, if you want to get a divorce, there's no representation. We do have court interpreters to help individuals with a different language so they can communicate with the court. But as far as attorneys, unless you get the help from Southern Nevada Legal Services, and a lot of people apply there and few are accepted, they do get an attorney there. It's a difficult job being a judge, and then at the same time making sure all the evidence gets in, so once it gets in, I can make a decision and be fair to both sides, and most importantly, do what's in the best interest of the children if there are children involved.
So, I mean, now that brings up a great point. So if someone was to come into your court, what is some advice you could offer as far as, you know, I mean, how to start off on the right foot?
Well, number one, I direct them down to the Self-Help Center. I said there's a lot of forms down there. I direct them to this Ask an Attorney program. And then I also direct them to the Clark County Law Library. I said that if it's going to be, for example, a relocation case, it's a very specific issues you need to address. So you need to become familiar with what I'm going to be trying to address in the decision, because the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court is going to want me to address these issues when I make a decision to make sure my decision stands up.
Yeah, I tell a lot of my own clients that judges are constrained by they have to follow the law, obviously. The law gets passed by the legislature. The law has specific factors that will guide a judge's determination on issues. We always have to stick to the issues. And I think a lot of people just have, I don't know if it's the proliferation of all these television programs with judges, where it seems like every item of evidence comes in and every argument gets to be listened to. But a lot of folks don't understand that, and they may even get frustrated and angry at you as a judge, but your hands are tied. You have to make a decision based upon very discrete issues.
Frustrated and angry, if they don't prevail with what they want, I'm the worst judge in town.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I understand.
That's true probably in every courtroom.
Every courtroom, yeah. Every judge has to face
the
that.
names they say, what you're called, but if the other side prevails, then I'm the best judge. But sometimes in these cases, neither one prevails, so you can't make everyone happy. If I focus on anything, it's trying to do what's in the best interest of the children and what the Supreme Court is looking for, because I want to make sure the decision is not reversed, because if it's reversed, it has to come back and we have to start all over. It's a lot of pressure and tension on the family who have to do it all over again.
A lot of expense as well, and time and resources. That's very true. Really helpful and very informative information, Judge. We're going to take a small break here. This is a segment of the show we call Paul Padda for the People, where we throw out some pointers and tips and information of general use and interest. And so we'll be right back after a short break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi folks, this is Paul Padda for the People with a helpful daily tip for you. Now, if you've been in a car accident, often what will happen is you'll get a phone call from the other side's insurance company, and they'll want to talk to you and they'll ask you questions. And listen, the first rule of life is just remember, the insurance company that represents the other driver, they're not there to help you. They're not there to give you money. They're not there to do anything except try to undermine your potential claim. It's very, very important that if you get a call from an insurance representative who represents the other adverse driver, just tell them you don't want to talk and lawyer up. That's one of the smartest things you can do. And I always tell people, some clients say, well, do I really need a lawyer? And I always tell them, well, do you really need a person to cut your hair? You could probably cut it yourself, but it's probably not a good idea. Yeah, you do need a lawyer. You need a lawyer in your corner who's going to fight for you, who has handled hundreds, if not thousands of cases, who knows the ins and outs, and who knows how to beat the insurance companies at their own game. So remember, if you get a phone call from an insurance company and acting all friendly and telling you how much they care and they want to help you, be very, very, very skeptical. They are not there to help you. They're not there to give you money. They're not bad people, but they have a job to do, and their job is to represent the driver who caused the accident and to help that person, not necessarily help you. Remember that, and be very cautious what you say. Just tell them, I have a lawyer, and he'll be in touch with you. Thank you. This is Paul Padda for the People with another helpful tip. Hey folks, welcome back to the Paul Padda Podcast. We are here with Judge Vincent Ochoa, who's been giving us a lot of great information, especially if you are a potential litigant or a litigant in family court. You've been giving us some great advice. Here's something that I've observed watching some pro se folks who come into civil court, Judge, and judges are human beings, right? We all make first impressions. How important is it for a litigant to dress, I would say not just appropriately, but dress to impress?
Well, I would recommend they come dressed in their Sunday best. Obviously, they're not going to win their case, but first impressions are important, and they could hurt their case depending how they're dressed. But I understand there's a lot of people that come right from work to court, and so it's a kind of a minor factor. But if you're going to come to court, try to be prepared.
Yeah. And try not to be overly emotional, right? I mean, I think, and that's hard to do in a family case.
Right.
But I think yelling and screaming and accusing the judge or
interrupting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's how they do it in court. They just, someone's talking over here and they say, that's a lie.
Yeah.
So I tell them, everyone's going to have a chance to speak. Let them speak first without interruption, and I promise you the other side won't interrupt you.
I could be wrong, but I would imagine child custody has got to be the most contentious and emotional type hearings that you deal with. Is that true?
That's true, very true, for several reasons. Obviously, everyone, the law, first we start with the law, which is in Nevada, joint physical custody, which means each parent has equal time with the child as much as possible. Obviously, for joint physical custody, we have a 60-40%, because obviously we can't go 50-50 because of different work schedules. So we try to do what's in the best interest of the children, and we tell both parents that. And also, the other reason it complicates the matter is that child support is related to whether it's a joint physical custody situation or primary physical custody.
Okay.
So a lot of people try to get joint physical custody to spend as much time with their children.
So what are the factors that you would weigh as a judge in terms of following the law, in deciding a child custody issue?
Well, there's specific factors in the statute, you know, how well the parents cooperate, which parent is more likely not to interfere with the other person's visitation. Also the time, I also look at how many years the individual has been married, the age of the child, you know, what kind of school district they're going to be living in. And so I just follow every factor in the statute, and they explain to also how much time that each parent has, because some people are out of state working, for example, truck drivers, and they're on the road, and they're only in the city for 1 or 2 days, so I have to take that into consideration. I don't want a child traveling in a truck during the school year.
Yeah, that's true. But all of these factors ultimately lead you to make a decision on what's the best. The standard is what's in the best interest of the child.
Right, because it's up to the person. I'm going to start with joint physical custody.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to start with a temporary schedule.
There's a presumption in favor of that.
Correct, exactly. And I start with that. I send them to family mediation so they can set their own schedule. And I tell them that I'm going to try to make a joint physical decision unless you have specific reasons that this person should have less time with the child. Because I believe that the best parent for a child is both parents. And unless you can prove otherwise, and sometimes there are factors. There's mental health issues, there's substance abuse issues, there's also time constraints from work. So we look at those factors as well.
Historically, you know, I've heard this before from men especially, that there seems to be a bias in the law in favor of women on child custody issues. And I don't know that that's necessarily borne out by statistics, but that's just something that you anecdotally hear from friends who've gotten divorced. Do you think that as society has evolved and changed, and now there are more women in the workplace, there's also, you know, a greater feeling that men and women are equal? Maybe it was born out of a paternalistic viewpoint from many, many years ago. Do you see any evidence of that, or is that really more of a...
It may have been before I started practicing law. It may have been true because the father was usually the one that was out and the breadwinner, and mom was home with the children. But now both parents are working usually, and the law is very clear now in statute and in the Supreme Court that both parents are the best parent for a child. We start with joint physical custody unless there's some factors we need to look at that should reduce someone's time with the child.
Yeah. Switching gears, do prenups hold up in court?
Prenups, I think the ones we see in court obviously don't hold up because they're in court. So, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I don't know how many out there in the real world are, you know, are valid, but the ones I see, obviously, I think maybe 10-20% don't hold up, but I don't see all of them because, you know, if it works, it works. It doesn't come into court, right?
Right. That's
so
true.
there must be a lot out there that work because people pay for them.
For the benefit of our viewers, we probably should tell them, what is a prenup?
A prenup is an agreement you usually make before you get married and saying, this is what I own now and this is what you own. You can keep that and I'll keep this. And it could have a lot of different conditions. For example, if we get divorced within the first 3 years, or you divorce me within the first 3 years, I'm not going to pay alimony. And if we stay married more than 10 years, this is the alimony I'm going to pay. So there's a lot of conditions you can put in a prenup, but basically is to protect your assets that you have owned. Because if you're an older couple getting married, you have a lot of assets, and you may not want that to become community property.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so explain what that means. What is the concept of community property?
Community property is when you get married, all items that you purchase are considered community. It belongs to both individuals. And your income, the check you earn, you bring home every other week is a community check. It's not your check. And a lot of people have problems with that.
I think, Judge, a lot of people would be very surprised to hear that.
You're right, because I went to a high school and I was talking to the students. I said, when you get married, the check you make is not your check.
Yeah.
And they said, wait, can you repeat that? I said, yes, it's a community property check.
Yeah.
And that means if you make $2,000, it's her check and your check. And,
Yeah.
and if you buy something with that, it's not you bought it, it's our property.
Right. And so there's a presumption in the law of Nevada that because it's community property, it's 50-50, correct?
Right. People buy a house and someone says, I pay for the house, I pay for them from my check, I paid the mortgage payment every year and every month. But what they don't realize is that check is community property, so you're really paying with community property assets.
Yeah.
So it's the house belongs to both individuals, and that's usually in the deed anyway.
But not all states are community property states, correct? Or is that the law in most
well,
states?
they don't call it community property in some states, but it's the same concept. They call it marital property.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
it's
right.
kind of similar. Most of the community property states are in the Southwest here, from Texas, Arizona, Nevada, California. That's what we call it out here in the West. But there's a lot of states in the East. They call it marital property, and it's almost the same concept. And we always give the parties plenty of opportunity to try to reach their own agreement, because they know what they want. You know, I may give them something during a lot of the property during the divorce proceeding, but that may be property they really don't want. They may want a specific, and so we let them negotiate whether they represent themselves or have an attorney representing them. And their agreement is, I always tell them, your agreement is a lot better than my decision, so please try to negotiate the case if possible, because you know what you want, especially when it comes to schedule visitation with a child, because you know your schedule and when you can be there and what your days off are.
Yeah.
And we'll take that into consideration at a trial, but I give you the first opportunity to reach your agreement.
Speaking of trials, I think a lot of people will be surprised to learn that in family court, all cases have bench trials. Can you explain to our viewers the difference between a bench trial and a jury trial?
Well, a jury trial, there's a jury that hears the evidence, and they make a decision on the evidence.
Yeah.
In a bench trial, there is no jury. The judge hears all the evidence and makes a decision. In Nevada, I think since 1865, we have had bench trials only. And if you go down to family court, you'll see every courtroom, there's no jury box. I don't know how it started. I think it was considered a private matter between husband and wife, and they didn't want the whole community involved. And there's also so many factors. How can you ask a jury to decide what's in the best interest of the child?
Yeah.
And not know all the factors they have to consider. As far as a judge and as a person, if somebody wants to change the law, I think in a way it would make the job easier for judges, because instead of having to make the decision, we just make rulings on the evidence, whether it comes in or does not come in, and it'll be like a criminal jury trial. The jury will make the decision.
Yeah, yeah. What do you see as one of the biggest challenges facing the court system now, as our population continues to grow in Clark County?
Well, number one, we're always working to try to find a way where we can provide attorneys for litigants who are self-represented. And the second biggest issue, obviously, is the growth of this city and county. We're trying to keep up with the growth. Our courtrooms are kind of reached their limit, so even if we add more judges, we may not have courtrooms to work 100% of the time. They may have to share courtrooms.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two biggest issues that I see. And it seems like society as a whole has become more active in going to court, and they see that as their right, which it is, but they seem to resolve more issues in court instead of out of court.
Judge, thank you so much for coming on today's show. You know, you've been a wealth of information and knowledge. Even though I'm an attorney, I've never practiced in family court, and I have learned so much today that I was not aware of. Thank you so much. I think we're very fortunate to have you as a judge in this county.
I appreciate that.
Good luck with the campaign. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that's another episode of the Paul Padda Podcast. We've been honored and privileged to have Judge Vincent Ochoa on the show today. Until next time, please stay safe and try to stay cool as the weather we head into the summer. Coming to you from Red Chimp Studios, this is the Paul Padda Podcast.
It's not about